In the shadowed valleys of the eastern mountains, there lived a man whom the villagers called the Weaver of Ash. No one had seen him smile in 30 years. While the rest of the world wore linen of bright saffron and deep indigo, he wore only the coarsest sackcloth, permanently stained with the gray dust of his hearth. They said he was a holy man, a prophet of sorrow, performing a lifelong penance that no ordinary man could endure. People would travel from distant cities just to leave offerings at his door, believing his extreme suffering made his prayers more powerful. They believed he was punishing himself for a sin so dark even the heavens wept for it. He had convinced himself that his endless mourning was the only way to earn God's forgiveness. But what happened next would challenge everything he believed about mercy and the heavy chains of his own regret.
His name was Silas. Decades ago, Silas had not been a weaver of sackcloth, but a merchant of the finest silks and wools. He was a man of great wealth and even greater pride. But pride is a blinding thing. During the years of the great famine, when the earth cracked and the rivers turned to mud, Silas's own brother Eli had come to him begging for grain. Eli's crops had failed, his family was starving, but Silas, fearful of losing his own fortune, had hardened his heart. He turned his brother away, locking his heavy wooden doors against his own blood. Silas survived the famine, but he soon learned that Eli had perished on the desolate roads, searching for food. In that moment, Silas's wealth became ashes in his mouth. He gave away his fortune, retreated to the mountains, and built a solitary life. He believed that joy was a sin he no longer deserved. His belief system became rooted entirely in punishment. He became a master weaver, but he refused to weave anything of beauty. He wove only heavy, scratching garments of mourning. His strength was his discipline, his endurance was legendary, but his strength had slowly become a terrible weakness. He had made an idol of his own regret. He believed his suffering was greater than God's capacity to forgive. He was trapped in a prison of his own making, polishing the bars of his guilt day after day. It was the deep midwinter, a season when the mountain winds howled like starving wolves. The frost was thick enough to crack stone. Silas was sitting by his dying fire, his hands numb as he wove his endless sackcloth, when a weak, desperate knocking came at his door. He unlatched the heavy wood. Standing in the blinding snow was a boy, no older than 10. The child was dressed in thin, ragged tunics, his lips blue, his body shaking violently. He was a wanderer, lost and separated from a passing caravan. "Please," the boy whispered, his voice barely cutting through the wind, "I am freezing." Silas pulled the boy inside. He stoked the fire, but the cold had sunk deep into the child's bones. The boy needed a heavy, warm cloak immediately, or he would not survive the night. But Silas looked around his barren hut. He had nothing but the thin, scratchy sackcloth he wore and wove. It held no heat. It offered no comfort. However, beneath the floorboards, hidden in a cedar chest for 30 years, was a vast length of the finest, thickest crimson wool. It was the last remnant of his old life, a cloak he had once intended to give to his brother Eli as a gift of reconciliation, a gift he had been too late to deliver. Silas had sworn a sacred vow before God never to touch the beautiful crimson wool again. To him, opening that chest meant breaking his eternal mourning. It meant abandoning his penance. The moral choice lay before him like a physical weight: keep his vow of suffering or break his rigid rules to save a dying child.
Night swallowed the valley. The wind screamed against the stones. Silas paced the dirt floor. The boy lay on a straw mat, his breathing growing dangerously shallow. Silas fell to his knees, his hands pressed against the cold dirt floor, beneath which the cedar chest was buried. His heart was a battlefield. "Lord," he wept silently, "I swore I would bear the weight of my sin forever. I swore I would never look upon beauty or comfort again. If I open this chest, if I take out the crimson wool, I am breaking the altar of my repentance. I am a murderer of my own blood. I do not deserve to touch the fabric of kings." Doubt gnawed at him. Guilt wrapped around his throat. He looked at the heavy sackcloth he wore. For 30 years, this scratchy fabric had been his identity. Without his regret, who was he? If he stopped punishing himself, did that mean he didn't care that his brother was dead? The silence of the room was broken only by the boy's ragged, failing breaths. The shadow of death was creeping into the hut. Silas looked at the fire. He looked at the boy. And then he looked at his own ash-stained hands. He realized that his sackcloth could not warm the child. His endless tears could not offer shelter. His 30 years of regret were completely useless to the boy who was dying in front of him. With a sudden, desperate cry, Silas dug his bleeding fingers into the dirt floor. He tore away the loose stones. He pulled the heavy cedar chest from the earth. The iron lock was rusted from decades of neglect. Silas grabbed a heavy iron poker from the hearth and brought it down on the lock with all his remaining strength. The metal shattered. He threw open the lid. There, untouched by time, glowing in the dim firelight, lay the thick, magnificent crimson wool. It was soft, heavy, and radiated a warmth Silas had denied himself for a lifetime. Tears streaming down his ash-covered face, Silas pulled the glorious fabric from the chest. He did not hesitate. He wrapped the thick crimson wool around the shivering boy, swaddling him entirely in its vibrant, life-saving warmth. Silas collapsed beside the boy, weeping, not tears of bitter regret, but tears of surrender. He had broken his vow. He had laid down his prideful suffering.
Hours passed. The deep warmth of the crimson wool drove the deadly cold from the boy's body. As the first light of dawn broke over the mountains, casting a golden hue through the window, the boy opened his eyes. He looked at the thick red fabric wrapped around him. He traced his small fingers over a unique, intricate golden pattern woven into the hem of the cloak. The boy looked up at Silas, his eyes wide with a sudden, profound recognition. "Where did you get this?" the boy asked, his voice steadying. Silas swallowed hard, his voice thick with sorrow. "It was meant for a man I wronged long ago, a man named Eli." The boy gasped. He sat up, clutching the crimson wool to his chest. "Eli?" the boy whispered. "Eli of the Southern Valley?" Silas froze. "Yes. How do you know that name?" The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Eli was my grandfather. He did not die on the roads during the famine. He was taken in by shepherds. He lived a long life." Silas's breath caught in his lungs. The world seemed to stop spinning. The boy continued, his voice echoing in the quiet hut. "Before my grandfather died, he told us of his brother, Silas. He said Silas was a good man who had been blinded by fear. He made us promise that if we ever found you, we must tell you that he forgave you the very day you turned him away." The boy held up the edge of the crimson cloak. "He told us to look for the man in ashes, because beneath the ashes, he knew you had the warmest heart." The heavy, suffocating chains of 30 years shattered in an instant. Silas realized the devastating truth. He had spent 3 decades punishing himself for an unforgivable sin, while forgiveness had been waiting for him the entire time. His regret had not been a holy offering to God. It had been a wall he built to keep God's grace out. God had not sent this child to test Silas's penance. God had sent the boy to set Silas free. That morning, Silas did something the valley had not seen in 30 years.
He walked out of his stone hut, carrying his rough, scratchy sackcloth. He threw it into the roaring fire. He washed the gray ash from his face and hands in the freezing mountain stream, letting the cold water cleanse him. He took the boy back to his people, not as a weeping prophet of sorrow, but as a man entirely reborn. Silas returned to his loom. He never wove sackcloth again. Instead, he wove garments of vibrant joy, blues, yellows, and deep crimson reds, giving them freely to anyone who was cold. He became known not as the Weaver of Ash, but as the Weaver of Grace.
Regret is a thief that steals the present by forcing us to endlessly pay for the past. So many of us carry the heavy sackcloth of our past mistakes. We wear our guilt like a badge of honor, secretly believing that if we just suffer enough, if we just punish ourselves long enough, we can somehow balance the scales of our wrongdoings. But true repentance is not found in endless self-destruction. True humility is accepting that you cannot save yourself with your own suffering. God does not desire our ashes. He desires our hearts. When we refuse to forgive ourselves, we are holding on to a debt that God has already canceled. If you are carrying a burden of regret today, remember the Weaver. Do not spend your life guarding a tomb that is already empty. Lay down your ashes, break open your chest of hidden grace, and allow yourself to finally be warmed by the forgiveness that has been waiting for you all along.